Welcome back to the On the Pitch podcast, where today all we're going to be talking about is Champions League football. Tons of matches for us to go over, and we're going to talk about what that means for these teams in the future, talk about the teams that didn't make it, and talk about the teams that made the playoffs, as well as they get the automatic bye. Stay tuned. Sponsored by Daily Culture Kombucha. Based right here in Kansas City, Daily Culture brews organic, small batch kombucha with purpose, turning a personal experiment into a healthier drink for the whole community. Their kombucha is alive with probiotics, beneficial acids, and real ingredients. No artificial flavors and no shortcuts. It's bold, refreshing, and crafted to support your gut while actually tasting great. Welcome to the culture. Let's drink better with Daily Culture Kombucha. I'm actually right now sipping on the hazy mango kombucha, and it is delicious. Check them out at dailyculturekombucha.com. And we're going to start off with our first match of the day was Ajax versus Olympiacos. Ajax out of the Netherlands and Olympiacos out of Greece. If you look at the recent table, looking at this now, Ajax is officially eliminated from the competition. They did not make it to the next round, but Olympiacos finished 18th. Final score was a 2-1 win for Olympiacos. Goal from Gelson Mertens and Hesse, and then Dolberg for Ajax was able to get a penalty there late in the game, but unfortunately, with the late goal by Olympiacos, Ajax was officially out. I'm pretty sure they were out already. The max they could have gotten was 9 points. This has just shown another poor result for the Dutch teams inside the Champions League, with Ajax being eliminated. And then, of course, we'll talk about PSV here in a little bit as well with their game against Bayern Munich. But again, just not a good showing by Ajax. Unfortunate for the Dutch clubs that they weren't able to get another representative into the knockout round. The next game we have here was Arsenal versus Kairat Almaty. Kairat Almaty was out of Kazakhstan, and they were the worst team in this year's Champions League, finishing very bottom, 36 out of the entire thing, only being able to receive a single draw with 7 losses, only able to score 7 goals with 22 against, with a negative 15 goal differential, and only receiving 1 point, whereas Arsenal, of course, topped the group, going complete 8-0 inside the Champions League with this format. Obviously, this game for Arsenal and Kairat was kind of it didn't really mean anything because Arsenal had already been through and Kairat was already eliminated. So really, this game was just kind of a slugfest. We kind of assumed that Arsenal was going to rest some guys. But if we actually look at the lineup, Arsenal came out with a pretty strong lineup. They had a couple of guys who came in, Norgard, Madueke, a couple of guys they rested. Obviously, Arrizabalaga got some playing time as well. But this game wound up actually being very exciting. Kairat was able to get a late goal with Ricardinho with a off the header, but overall Arsenal was the better team. Gyökeres, Havertz, and Martinelli all scored early in the first half, but for there a little bit, Kairat looked like they could have potentially got the win with the penalty that was given for Jorginho there early in the 7th minute. But overall, Arsenal was just the better team, and as they should. This is a team from Kazakhstan, and this is a team from the Premier League, one of the teams that are top of the team that's top of the Premier League. And obviously, this should have been this kind of result. Kairat made it a game there late in the game, but overall, this was a pretty obvious result for Kairat and Arsenal as well. So good for Kazakhstan to have a representative inside the Champions League. But again, it's going to take them a long time for them to kind of build up that Champions League level, and the money that they're going to get from this is going to really help the Kazakhstan league as well as the federation. Next one we have here, we have Athletic Club Bilbao versus Sporting Lisbon. Obviously, if you're looking at the score now, Atletico Club did lose this game 3-2 to Sporting Lisbon. Sporting Lisbon actually overtook and knocked Real Madrid out of the top 8 with this win, finishing with 5-1-2 with 16 points. And then, of course, this did knock out Atletico Bilbao, who needed a win today to guarantee that they would make it into the knockout round. They finished 29th. I think they're the only Spanish club that finished, besides Villarreal, the only 2 Spanish clubs that didn't finish in the top 24 of the Champions League this year. Sporting needed a late goal to do it. Late goal coming from Santos. Great finish into the bottom corner. And overall, this was a very, very exciting game. I was only able to catch about the last 10 minutes of it. Was able to catch that game-winning goal for Sporting. And you could just tell they are on a roll. They have become a team that out of nowhere, they are just fun to watch. They've always been a good team. They've always been one of those teams that, could potentially upset a bigger team. And this year in the Champions League, they've really showed that they can compete at that next level. And this was a fun game. Unfortunate for Atletico Bilbao, but good for Sporting Lisbon to move on to the next round and, of course, get that bye and not have to worry about the playoffs. This next one, I just have to I have got to tip my hat to Bodo Glimt. If you were a person who was watching the Europa Conference League a couple of years ago, you would have been watching Bodo Glimt and how they played. They've just beaten Atletico Madrid 2-1 in Madrid. Now, this is the same team that beat Man City last week 3-1. A lot of people don't realize this. Bodo Glimt is one of the highest places you can go in Scandinavia. I think it's in Bodo Glimt is out of Norway, right? And they are literally one of the hardest places to go and visit. They have built an entire, you know, almost like a phenomenal place to play. But of course, going to Madrid and getting a result for any team is tough. But to finish 2-1 at Madrid, being a team from Norway, is just absolutely huge. This makes them finish in the top 25. They get the 23 spot with 9 points, 2 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses, with a -1 goal differential. They actually overtook Benfica in their due to their goal differential. But think about this: would you have ever thought a team from Norway would do better than Benfica, Marseille, PSV, Atletico Bilbao, Napoli, Ajax, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Villarreal in the Champions League? You probably wouldn't have done that. But if you have been watching Norwegian football, you saw this coming. They are an absolute unit with how they play. And whoever has to play them in the knockout and in this playoff round, the trip to Norway is going to be really tough. So good luck on that. And Atletico Madrid just did not look good. They finished 14th in this. Obviously, they still made it through the playoff. There was a chance that they could potentially get that eighth spot with a big win today, but obviously the loss keeps them at 14, so they are going to be in the playoffs. There is a potential, maybe we get a Atletico Madrid versus maybe like a Barcelona or something like that in the round of 16, and I'm here for it. I'll take it. But overall, just an absolute great showing by the Norwegian league as well as Bodø Glimt. They're going to wind up becoming the most dominant team in Norway with the money that they're going to get from the Champions League. And just, I tip my hat to the Norwegian league. I love seeing the underdogs. Barcelona versus FC Copenhagen. Now, this was one of those games where I saw it all over Twitter. I saw it all over the internet. Barcelona's losing 1-0 to a team from Denmark. They're losing. They're cooked. They're not even the same team that they are. They're terrible. Yada, yada, yada. All this stuff. And then you realize that, oh, they still have to play a second half. Lewandowski, Lamine Yamal, Rafinha, and Rashford all get goals in the second half to wind up beating Copenhagen 4-1, sending Copenhagen out as number 31. They had a chance with a win against Barcelona. They had a chance to potentially get into the top 19. But of course, Barcelona shows their skills in the second half. They finished in that fifth spot, 5-1-2 with 16 points, getting that bye and not having to worry about the playoffs. And overall, just again, Barcelona at home, it's going to be a tough task for anybody, especially for a Danish team who doesn't have the resources and the players that Barcelona has. But overall, Copenhagen, not a terrible showing. They finished 2-2-4 with a chance of making it into the playoffs. They could be proud for themselves. Again, these teams that are coming from these smaller leagues and having a chance to play against these big teams like this, and the money that they're going to receive is going to help them for the future. I touched on this one a few minutes ago with Villarreal being knocked out. They do finish in as the second worst team in the Champions League this year, not winning a single game, going with 1 draw, 7 losses, barely going above Kairat Almaty out of the Kazakhstan league. So a poor showing by Villarreal here in the Champions League without even getting a single win. But Bayer Leverkusen does finished as 16 with 12 points, 3 wins, 3 draws, 2 losses. And Bayer Leverkusen gets a 3-0 win here with Grimaldi and 2 goals from the American Tillman. So that's always good to see. You want to see an American doing well in the Champions League. You want to see them continue to go far in this tournament. Bayer Leverkusen has been kind of shaky in the Bundesliga this year. Obviously, Bayern Munich is back to being the dominant team. Bayer Leverkusen is no longer being coached by Xabi Alonso, which is kind of showing. But overall, I mean, you cannot be too angry with their result here in the Champions League. They're still in it. Tillman getting 2 goals, of course, is always good for the American national team. You had Buchanan here who, if you don't know who that is, he is a Canadian international here, and he did play in MLS. Obviously, him getting knocked out of the Champions League is not good for them. But again, good showing by here and seeing the American get 2 goals. That makes us happy for USA. Next game we have here is Inter Milan versus Borussia Dortmund. Inter Milan, of course, winning this game 2-0. Dortmund really just not looking much offensively. Overall, just kind of a boring game. Inter Milan was definitely the better team. And I think at this point, there was really nowhere for these teams to go. They really weren't able to push into the potential top eight. Dortmund really was kind of set in that 17 spot, really, unless some crazy games were going to happen underneath them. There really wasn't. They were basically set for that playoff spot. And kind of the same thing for Inter Milan. They really had nowhere that they could potentially move up and down. But now there's a playoff game that is going to potentially be a lot tougher for Inter Milan, now that Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain are both in the playoff rounds. So there's going to be a lot of crazy playoff games coming up after this. Overall, Borussia Dortmund and Inter Milan, kind of a boring game. It left for two late goals for Inter Milan, but again, there really wasn't anywhere for these teams to move, but besides potentially helping their playoff stock. They weren't going to be in the top eight. And unfortunate, because these two teams are very good, which means those playoff games and those first round games by the teams that get the buys through the round of 16, there's a potential, big games that are going to be coming for whoever gets Borussia Dortmund and Inter Milan in that first round. Club Brugge 3, Marseille 0. Now, obviously, if you're an American national team fan, Tim Weah is officially knocked out of the Champions League with Marseille. They do finish as that 25 spot because of some late drama that happened with Benfica and Real Madrid, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yes, Tim Weah did play in this game. He received the highest rating for Marseille. So according to FOTMob, he was the best performing player for Marseille in this game, coming out as the left wing. But unfortunately, Club Brugge was way too good for Marseille today. Simon Mignolet, which he is still playing. Look at that, guys. 37 years old, starting and keeper, got a 9.1 rating here on FOTMob. It's good to see him playing. I've always loved him as a keeper, even when he was at Sunderland and, of course, when he was at Liverpool. Not a Liverpool fan, but I've always loved him as a keeper. He has a great podcast that he did with Ben Foster. You should totally go check it out on the Fozcast. Totally would recommend that. He's a great guy. So it's good to see him, even in his later years, still competing at that highest level and bringing teams from Belgium, like these smaller leagues, are now finally starting to compete with these bigger teams. Now, Marseille is not the best team in France, but they're definitely a well-known name. They're definitely a big club, especially in France and especially in Europe. So this is a good win for the Belgian league, and they do finish in the playoffs as that number 19 spot. So they were safe. Again, I don't think, unless there was something crazy that was going to happen in here, they do finish as that 19 spot. So they'll most likely play Galatasaray or potentially Olympiacos, somewhere like that in the playoffs. So again, a good showing from the Belgian league, 3-0 win against Marseille. Now, if you're a Tottenham Hotspurs fan, you're probably wondering, how the heck are we performing so well in the Champions League, yet they're doing so poor in the Premier League? Well, here's the thing. You're not playing Premier League teams every week, right? But this is not good for the Bundesliga. Eintracht Frankfurt finishes number 33 with one win, one draw, and 6 losses, with basically only 4 points, and Tottenham finishes fourth with 5 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. That one loss, I think, came against, if I'm looking right, PSG. So again, a good team that they lost to, but they're 5 wins. They get the win against Copenhagen. They get a win versus Slavia Prague. They get a win versus Borussia Dortmund, and then they get this win from Eintracht Frankfurt. So Tottenham takes out 2 Bundesliga teams to move on and get the 4th spot right behind Liverpool at the 3 spot. So good win from Tottenham. Maybe they can bring some of this good form into the Premier League and save their season. Do I really need to talk about this one? Liverpool 6, Karabag 0. Karabag, again, coming out of the Azerbaijani league. They did get a surprise win against Eintracht Frankfurt a couple weeks ago, but as we could see, Eintracht Frankfurt were already out. This was over for them. Liverpool finishes 6-0 against them with the number 3 spot right behind Bayern Munich, as well as Arsenal with 18 points, 6 wins, 0 draws, 2 losses. And of course, Karabag finishes as number 22, and they do make it into the playoff spot. Them finishing 22, again, huge for the Azerbaijani league, right? How many times are you going to say that a team from Azerbaijan is going to do better than 2 Spanish teams, German teams, and all of these other countries? Again, the money that is in Champions League is completely changing football. Now, do I think Karabag is going to win the whole thing? No. But they're making it in these knockout rounds. They're making it further in the tournament. Money talks. Money, money, money. Again, good win from Liverpool, 6-0 against Karabag. Man City gets the 2-0 win versus Galatasaray. Again, seeing Man City not finish in the top, or sorry, in the top four in this kind of blows my mind. But again, they finished at that top eight spot, going over Real Madrid, and they get that bye, moving on to the next round. Galatasaray did finish as number 20, so they are going to be in that playoff spot with a record of 3-1-4, 10 points. And then Man City finishes that eighth spot, so they get the bye going into the round of 16 with a 5-1-2 record and 16 points. There was potential, that maybe goal differential, they would have bumped up to maybe that seventh spot. But again, with Sporting Lisbon getting that win today, that bumps them up on goals for or goal differential. But overall, great showing from them. Sorry, actually, they had the same goal differential, but they scored more goals, so that put them above Man City. So good showing from Man City. Of course, they get that eighth spot, so they get the bye. Galatasaray will have to go into the playoffs. Another good game. Holland gets a goal, which you love to see. Juventus and Monaco tied 0-0. Obviously, not the most exciting game in the entire world. Both teams were basically in for the playoffs. Weston McKennie did start this game and got a 7.3 rating. Besides Perrin, the goalkeeper, was the second best field player for him, with him and Kelly getting as the 7.3 rating. So best ratings for field players for them. And obviously, if you look at the FOTMOB ratings, it looks like Monaco kind of dominated the ratings here as well. And then Balogun did get a 6.1 rating, did not score, but did play the full 90. Weston McKennie also played the full 90. So again, good seeing American players go farther in this competition. Juventus did finish as the number 13 spot with 3 wins, 4 draws, 1 loss. And then Monaco finished as 2 wins, 4 draws, 2 losses with 10 points. So it's the 21. So again, more Americans going into the later stages of the Champions League. I'm here for it. Love to see it. Now we have the battle of the already eliminated Paphos versus Slavia Prague. Both teams were already eliminated. Paphos did go out with a 4-1 win versus Slavia. Good game for them, but obviously both teams were already eliminated, so it's kind of just a slugfest for really nothing. Obviously, good for these leagues to get the money that they're going to get out of this, but it would have been nice to see one of these teams make it into the later stages. Now we have PSG versus Newcastle, and honestly, right here, both of these teams needed a win today to potentially get into that eighth spot. Newcastle getting the goal from Willock, and then, of course, PSG getting the goal from Vitinha. Both teams finish as number 12 and 13 here in the playoff spots, with a potential, if they could have gotten 2 more points with their goal differential, they could have potentially snuck in as one of the top 5, maybe even push for. No, Tottenham had 17 points, so they would have eventually been they could have gotten a bye now and been in that 5, 6, 7, or 8 spot. But unfortunately, both getting a draw saves them. They stay in the playoff range, but they both could have potentially been in the top 8 and gotten that bye. They're unfortunate to get a draw here. Of course, good battle, good game. Overall, exciting match. Even for a 1-1 draw, I'll take it. But again, these teams probably feel like they left a lot on the field that could have done better. And now we move on to Napoli versus Chelsea. Again, Napoli needed a win today to potentially save themselves. They could have maybe have gotten into a playoff spot, but Chelsea was too much for them. Chelsea comes out with a 3-2 win from goals from Fernandez and João Pedro. And then, of course, Napoli had a goal from Vergara and Højlund. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough for them to get on to the next round. Again, Napoli was looking to get into a playoff spot. Chelsea finishes as number 6, so they get the bye moving into the round of 16. Overall, good game, good match, good competitive game. We have another Belgium team here getting a win with Union Saint-Gilloise versus Atalanta, and unfortunately, Union was not able to get into the playoff round. They are eliminated out of the Champions League, even with a 1-0 win here. They would have needed to win 9-0 against Atalanta to be able to move on to the playoff rounds. Atalanta does stay in. They do finish as number 15 with 13 points, 4 wins, 1 draw, 3 losses. And unfortunately, Union does, again, -9 goal differential. Even on 9 points, they were not going to be able to pass Benfica and get into that top 24. So good showing from the Belgian team to get a win on the last day, but it would have been basically impossible for them to even get into the playoffs. And now we have PSV versus Bayern Munich. Again, Bayern Munich gets the win 2-1 against PSV. With PSV did make it interesting at the very end. They scored an absolute worldie. One of the best goals I've ever seen off a little 1-2 combination at the top of the box. Kid finishes it, goes upper 90 on it, makes it 1-1. But of course, Bayern Munich subs on. Literally, they were up 1-0. Musiala gets a goal, which is good to see him coming back from injury. He wound up playing, I want to say 80 minutes, or at least close to 60 to 70 minutes. But there was a moment where Bayern Munich made 4 subs, right? The subs that come on was Harry Kane, Olise, Serge Gnabry, and I want to say it was Alphonso Davies were the four subs that came on when they're up 1-0 against PSV. PSV was just trying to survive. There was a moment there with when it was Drew that PSV could have potentially moved up into the one of these spots because they do have a 0 goal differential even after losing 2-1 today. But with 9 points, they could have potentially been as that 23 spot and knocked out Benfica or Boda Glimt. So there was a chance for them to make it, but unfortunately, Harry Kane comes on and scores an absolute banger of a goal, and Bayern Munich does finish as 7-0-1. Their only loss coming against the 3-1 loss against Arsenal, who finished 8-0 in the Champions League. So Bayern Munich moves on into the gets the bye, goes into the round of 16 with 21 points, almost a perfect Champions League season. But unfortunately, those pesky Gunners did win that one game. So there's a chance that we could potentially see them again later in the later stages. But finishing as the 1 and 2, it wouldn't be until potentially the final. So again, Bayern Munich gets the 2-1 win. And again, PSV, it's not good for the Dutch teams, man. Getting knocked out, both teams, PSV and Ajax, both being knocked out, not going to later stages is not good for the Dutch league. It does not look good for what they're trying to do, especially with other teams from smaller leagues making it later in this stage. And I had to save the best for last. Benfica 4, Real Madrid 2. If you were watching this game and if you've looked anywhere on Twitter, you would see that Benfica was up 3-2 late in the game. And then if you look at this name that you see right here, Trubin, look at him, goalkeeper, scores a header with basically, I want to say like maybe 8 to 10 seconds left in the game to make it 4-2 against Real Madrid. This goal difference, they needed to score at least 2 goals to potentially get them into the knockout round. And if you look here at the table, they do finish as the number 24, the last team in with a -2 goal differential. That goal saved them from being knocked out and Marseille or Pafos potentially being in. It looks like Marseille would have been in if that goalkeeper does not score that goal. As a goalkeeper myself, seeing a goalkeeper score always, always, always makes me happy, right? Real Madrid got a little chippy there at the end. A lot of arguing, a lot of stupid stuff that happened. And Asensio and Rodrigo did get sent off in the 90th minute and then the 90th plus 7 minute, causing that free kick that then led to the Benfica 4th goal. Real Madrid does drop out of the top 8, finishing as that 9th spot with the loss today. All they needed was a draw, and Man City would have been in the playoff round. But now Real Madrid is in the playoff round with 5 wins, 3 losses. Their losses coming against Liverpool, with Man City, and of course now with Benfica. So Real Madrid, of course, fired Xabi Alonso, and it's going to be tough for them to compete in this tournament now. But they have a playoff round. It's still Real Madrid. We'll see what they do after that. So here's the final look at that final Champions League table. Here's how it finished. We have the top 8 with Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Tottenham, Barcelona, Chelsea, Sporting Lisbon, Man City. And then, of course, with 9 through 24, we have Real Madrid, Inter Milan, Paris Saint-Germain, Newcastle, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Atalanta, Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund, Olympiacos, Club Brugge, Galatasaray, Monaco, Karabag, Boda Glimt, and Benfica. And of course, the teams that were eliminated, we have Marseille, Pafos, Union Saint-Gilloise, PSV, Atletico Bilbao, Napoli, FC Copenhagen, Ajax, Eintracht Frankfurt, Slavia Prague, Villarreal, and Kairat Almaty. So again, there's going to be some crazy matchups. The knockout round is going to look like this. Once the official draw happens here in the next couple of days, you could potentially have if this is how it looks in this first round, you could potentially have a Bayern Munich versus Borussia Dortmund or Bayer Leverkusen here in that first or that round of 16. You could potentially also have a Man City versus Real Madrid. You could potentially also see a PSG versus Barcelona. You could also see a Juventus versus Liverpool. You could also see, I mean, it's basically like for like on the other side. So there's some crazy games that you could potentially see in this next round of the Champions League. And it is going to be one of the best tournaments I've ever seen in my lifetime with how many good teams are still in it. And there's a lot of underdogs too. Boda Glimt is not no slouch. Benfica knows how to win whenever they need to. And again, Champions League, man. That's all I got to say. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on Spotify as well as YouTube. And you have a good day.